Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today, we're going to take a look at the Asia bracket. Yesterday I did my NA bracket. Here's a look at it if you are curious. But I explained the reasoning behind all my picks and whatnot in the video from yesterday, so check it out, linked in the description and in the cards as well. But let's jump into the Asia bracket. This one I think a little different, a little bit easier to predict. Fewer teams, and I think the path is a little more interesting. I think that it's not as wide open as NA is, or sorry, it's more wide open than NA. I think NA is more predictable for who wins, whereas this one I think it's, there's an obvious prediction, but I don't think it's as surprising if they don't win. So I'm going to start with the bottom part of this bracket, the Guangzhou Charge versus Chengdu Hunters and the NYXL versus the Hangzhou Spark, before I talk about London versus Seoul, because I think this part here is more interesting, and then I can just kind of talk about these two games here together. So Guangzhou versus Chengdu, I think, is a pretty easy pick. Guangzhou's the better team. They have proven themselves to be the better team time and time again. They have looked way better than Chengdu has, and Chengdu's had some moments, but this season I think they've been more disappointed than last season, which is interesting because there's been some stuff that's come out about the fact that the Chengdu Hunters in 2019 couldn't scrim anybody because nobody wanted to scrim them because you didn't learn anything. So they were just going into games scrimming like contenders teams and whoever, else couldn't find a scrim partner. And they had a pretty good season last season. This season, they're doing a lot more to kind of play more meta compositions. And I think what they're showing is that they're not as strong when they, are trying to run meta and they're not running their funny, wacky Wrecking Ball comps. So I think the Charge win this one. I think the Charge right now are the second best team in Asia. I think this is a pretty easy win for them. I don't love what Chengdu has done this season. I think they've had some ups, but they've had way more downs. And I think they're easily the weakest team in this region. So Charge, I think, take this one pretty easily. The interesting match is the NYXL versus the Hangzhou Spark, because the last time these two teams played, 2 weeks ago now, the NYXL fell to the Spark 3-2 in 6 maps. And I think a lot of it came down to New York made a lot of mistakes. They did some things that were kind of stupid and dumb. And I still don't love Hotpa. I think he has been a huge disappointment this season. I think he has not been what New York needed in a flex tank. And I think that they should give Bianca a chance to play. But I digress. The Spark have also hit a bump in the road where they looked worse against the London Spitfire and the Guangzhou Charge and the Shanghai Dragons than they did when they played New York. So maybe New York is just not that good. But New York beat London. New York had a close series with Guangzhou. It's difficult to say for sure what's going on here with these two teams. Hangzhou's dip recently makes me a little more worried than New York's dip, because New York didn't get 3-0'd by anybody, right? They had a 3-2 loss to Hangzhou, 3-2 loss to Guangzhou, and they had a 3-0 win over Seoul and a 3-1 win over London. Whereas, Hangzhou had a 3-2 win over New York and a 3-0 loss to London and a 3-2 loss to Guangzhou and a 3-0 loss to Shanghai. So New York seemingly has the edge, that they've been playing more consistently. They've been playing a little bit better. But the last time these two teams played, as I said, the Hangzhou Spark were victorious. So the question is, well, who wins this match this time around? I give the edge to New York, though I'm not crazy about Hotpa, as I've said. I think Hotpa is incredibly weak for this team. I think he's a major weakness for this team. I don't really like the way he plays. I think he doesn't have great synergy with the rest of the team. And I think that they need to play Bianca more, just to let him play. He hasn't played once this season. There's no reason why he hasn't, or there's no reason why they should have just kept him on the bench this long. He should have had some time to play, because he's a good player from everything I've seen and heard. And I think that Hotpa is good on some flex tanks, but he gets outclassed on a lot of the other ones. His Diva's average. His Sigma's okay. His Hog is rare. I think his value is the highest. You can run those Hog comps, and he looks pretty good on Hog. But if Hog is where you're the best, you maybe shouldn't be a starting flex tank. So unless Bianca is just actually the worst flex tank in the league, I don't think that it would be a bad idea to play Bianca. So those two, I think Guangzhou, New York move on. Seoul versus London, I think, is a really good match because I think London has looked really good recently. I have been high on London since they actually started playing in Asia. I didn't think they were going to be dominating, teams like Guangzhou and New York and Hangzhou or Seoul, though they did dominate Hangzhou. I thought London would be 4th, 5th best team in the region. Better than Chengdu, maybe better than Hangzhou, maybe better than Seoul, but likely probably like 5th or 6th best. But this is an interesting matchup because they were dominant against the Spark. They played okay against the New York Excelsior last time they played. They dominated the Chengdu Hunters, but they had a big loss to the Shanghai Dragons. Seoul Dynasty looked pretty good this past weekend when they played against Chengdu. They started Michelle, and I thought Michelle had a good performance. It wasn't, one of the best flex tank performances I've ever seen, but it was a solid performance, and I think that shows some growth for this team, that they're actually willing to take Marvel out of the lineup, right? A player who, whenever he wasn't playing, they always lost the map. The first time that they had a map with Michelle or Illicit or Slime where they actually won was this past weekend when they beat Chengdu 3-0. So Seoul, I think, looks better, and I think they've improved. I think that is a positive thing, but it's 1 week that we've seen good performances out of Seoul this month, and it was the one match against Chengdu where they looked pretty good, and they had the map win over Shanghai where I don't think they played too poorly against Shanghai, but Shanghai's just a better team. So I think Seoul is the more talented team when it comes to this matchup. I think London wins the flex tank matchup. I think Bernard is really good. I think Bernard is probably the 3rd, maybe 2nd best flex tank in Asia right now. I think he's better than Elsa, better than Michelle. Right now, I think he's better than QOQ. QOQ could be better later on, but I think he's better than QOQ right now. I think he's better than Hotba. I think you look at, Krong, probably better than Bernard right now, especially on Sigma, but Bernard's still pretty good, and Void is definitely better right now. So I think London's matchup is big there, and I think that Sanguinar is a very good main support player as well, and I think what London has done is very interesting. I think their DPS lineups are pretty good as well. They have at least 10 players I think, that are solid players who this team could run with going forward and find success. This match is difficult for me to pick. I want to give the edge to the Seoul Dynasty. I think they are just ever so slightly better, and it'll be interesting to see, Prophet, Gesture, and Padoshin go up against the London Spitfire, their former team, even though there's only one player on that Spitfire roster that they ever played with, and that's Krillin. I think the Seoul Dynasty are just better, but I think it's a close one. I think it's a 3-2. I don't think Seoul completely obliterates London. I could see London winning as well, but I think right now I would go with Seoul, just because I think they're a team who care more about tournament play. They don't care about the regular season. This is a match that means something. There's money at stake. There's wins towards your season total. When you know your season's not going as well as it can go, this is when you go all in and say, we need to get some wins here, and we need to be playing our best to try to get some wins to help us going down the road. The Shanghai Dragons then would be awaiting the winner of that London Seoul series. I have it going the way of the Seoul Dynasty, mainly because I think it would just end up being a better match than if London moved on. Yes, London in the May Melee looked really good against Shanghai and almost beat Shanghai, and I think it would have been crazy if Shanghai had lost to London Spitfire, but it was definitely possible and not something that was unavoidable. But I think that the Seoul Dynasty Shanghai Dragons matchup has been really interesting this season. This past weekend, it wasn't the best one we've seen, but it was pretty good. Seoul looked pretty good against the Shanghai Dragons, and Seoul has taken a game off the Shanghai Dragons already once this season. Seoul's been inconsistent, but they've looked good at times, and they've had very good peaks. And I think when they know what they want to play and they play what they're comfortable playing, they look very good. If Michelle is playing, I don't know how well this team does. I think they are going to have to rely on the double shield as much as possible if they want to beat the Shanghai Dragons. I think Flex Tank really is the place where this whole Dynasty need to add another player, because I don't think Marvel is going to be able to excel when trying to play Diva or Zarya. He looks good on Sigma. That's really about it. And Michelle is okay. Not the worst, but not the best either. And I think that if you're Seoul, you can definitely find a really good flex tank in Korea who would want to join the team. So I think this is an interesting matchup. I think the Shanghai Dragons are the better team, and I think they win it because I think they're obviously the better team. They won the May Melee. I think that they're the favorites to win the Summer Showdown as well. I don't see why they wouldn't be. But it's an interesting matchup, and I think there's certainly something to look out for there with that matchup. My final semifinals match then would be the Guangzhou Charge against the NYXL. This is an interesting one, obviously. These two teams have played 3 times this season. The first game was a 3-0 for New York. I think it was a 3-0 at least. The second game was a 3-1 for Guangzhou, and the third game was a 3-2 for Guangzhou. So Guangzhou is winning the season series and the all-time series 3-1. But the season series is 2-1. So this is an interesting one. New York, I think, has had a lot of struggles. I think Guangzhou has looked a lot better recently. I don't know if Nero or Neptuno will be back in the lineup for them. But they don't really need them because New York lost to the lineup of mostly Korean players plus Eileen. So you have to ask the question then, what is New York's key to victory if they want to win? Because clearly when they were running the double shield matchup, Krong was outclassing Hotba in every way. Because Krong is very good at Sigma, and he's a very good flex tank, and Hotba is, in my opinion, bottom 3 in Asia. Maybe not bottom 3. Maybe he's just 4th. Because he might not be better than QOQ, but he also might be better than QOQ. I don't know. But I certainly think that he's worse than Bernard, and he's worse than Void, and he's worse than Krong. But whether or not he's worse than QOQ is yet to be seen. So they were getting completely decimated the last time they played by Krong. And that's who they need to be able to stop. And I don't know if this team has the ability to do that. I don't know what they're going to run. They could run the Genji comps we've seen in North America because they have Haksal and they have Who Are You and they have Libero. They can run Genji pretty effectively. They might run Double Shield and get run over in the Double Shield matchup. They might do what they did last time when they played Shanghai in the May Melee and they just ran Brawl for whatever reason. And they were running Ryan Zarya and getting completely run over. A hero that Hotba doesn't look very good on is the Zarya. I don't know what to expect out of New York. It's the type of thing where I feel more confident in Guangzhou every week because I think that Guangzhou knows what they want to do. New York just looks like they just say, hey, we're going to try this week, and it probably won't work, but we're not going to switch off of it if it doesn't because that's the way to learn new compositions, which I guess in a way is true, but sometimes you just have to accept that a composition doesn't work and switch. And I worry that New York doesn't do that. So I think this one could be close. I think New York could win this one for sure. As a New York fan, I would love to see New York actually win the Summer Showdown, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think the Guangzhou Charge is just too good. They're the better team. And I think the Guangzhou Charge, right now, there's not really a reason for me to think that the Guangzhou Charge lose to the NYXL. So the final match for the APAC tournament, in my opinion, is Shanghai versus Guangzhou. The top 2 teams in the last tournament by seeding. Top 2 teams by seeding in this tournament. The matchup that I think we should have gotten. I think it would be closer now than it was the last time these two teams played. They haven't played in a while. I know the Guangzhou guys have said that Shanghai are incredible in scrims. They're better in scrims than they are in just on the stage or in actual matches. So this is a difficult one, I think, for the Guangzhou Charge. Shanghai Dragons are that good. I think ultimately this series does go the way of Shanghai. I think Shanghai is just a better team right now. I think if you look at what Shanghai has done so far this season, there's no reason to think that the Guangzhou Charge are the team that would beat them. So right now, I feel more confident in Shanghai and their ability to win. I don't believe it is impossible for Shanghai to lose. I think if Guangzhou or New York or Seoul or even London, these teams that move on, right? If they're able to come up with a really good composition, a different style of composition than what we've seen, right? If we're able to see this, Genji dive or some really weird composition, surrounding double shield or, whatever, some Rhine composition, some Brawl composition, I think it's possible a team could beat them. I just think it's very unlikely. I think Shanghai's too good right now. They look like the best team in the league. definitely the best team in Asia. I think it's difficult to say, hey, yeah, I think that the Dragons are going to lose. The region's going to be it's going to be a good tournament, I think. I know the bracket looks a little weird. It's just the way that when you pick a winner, it takes you to like share your bracket. So I had to do that behind the scenes a little bit, but I think it's an interesting series that we get. No matter who makes it to the finals, I think it'll be interesting. But I just don't think anybody stops Shanghai right now. I think they're too good, they're too strong, and I think that if you really just look at these teams, I mean, who's Shanghai going to lose to? Maybe Seoul, maybe Guangzhou, maybe New York, but most likely Shanghai's going to win the whole thing. And I think that that's what we're going to see because I have no reason to believe otherwise at the moment. But that's my APAC bracket. If you want to use the Overwatch League bracket maker on your own, you can check it out in the description down below. It is accessible and viewable, and you can do your own bracket down there. But that's all I have for you today. Let me know your own bracket in the comments down below. You can, share yours or whatever. But that's all I have for you today. So if you enjoyed, consider liking and subscribing for more content like this in the future. Hope you're all staying safe and healthy. And until next time, I will get out of here. So thank you so much once again. And bye-bye.